when I got to work with her just last week. I'm glad she's here. It's Brigida Santos, ladies and gentlemen. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Thanks for making the drive. I appreciate it.
Yep.
That's very nice of you. Los Angeles traffic is very tough. Well, let's get right into it. The Democrats are lost. They have no message still. And the message that the DNC and MSNBC is putting out for them is all your troubles and problems are caused by Russia. And it has nothing to do with the corporatization of the Democratic Party, which turned its back on workers in 1992. So, in fact, here's Senator Chris Murphy lamenting on MSNBC that the Democrats keep talking about Russia. And here's what he had to say about it.
You know, Senator Harold Ford was talking a little bit earlier about what Democrats need to do to win elections in states like Georgia and places across the South and the Midwest. It's kind of reflective of the conversation we had after the presidential election back in November, which is that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party said we need to be more progressive. And we heard that last night and again this morning from groups like MoveOn.org. The lesson was that John Ossoff was too moderate. Do you think running for office right now in this climate as a Democrat means you ought to be more progressive or more moderate?
I think what it means is the Democrats have to be hyper-focused on an economic message that tells people that the Republican Party is all about economic growth for millionaires and billionaires, and the Democratic Party is about economic growth for everybody. And I think Robert Costa is right. The fact that we have spent so much time talking about Russia has been a distraction from what should be the clear contrast between Democrats and the Trump agenda, which is on economics. You know, when I'm back in Connecticut, I often get on a commuter bus and ride it for just an hour to talk to folks, that frankly don't normally call my office or write my office. And I'll just say they are never talking about issues like Russia. They are not talking, frankly, about what's on cable news at night. They are talking about the same things: wages. They're talking about education. They're talking about public safety. And so I think Democrats have to be hyper-focused on an economic contrast. And I think this
Hyper-focused. Guess who is hyper-focused? Here's Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is, he's proposing the sort of bold thinking we need. He proposes the idea, give everybody a job. It's quite a crazy idea. What are the Democrats doing? The Democrats just sued Russia and Trump. That's what they decided to do. Instead of actually offering something to people to vote for them, they decided to make a PR stunt and sue Russia and the Trump campaign for their 2016 meddling. And so it led me to say, hey, Tom Perez, would love to have you come on talk about your lawsuit against the First Amendment. It's a great idea to get the youth not interested in any Democrats ever again. Saw you chat with Chris Hayes, played nice for his geriatric audience and didn't lay a glove on you. Which was true. We already covered that part. And then I love this. This is my favorite response. They're going to be really sad when they sue the First Amendment and people still don't like Hillary Rodham Clinton. So what do you think about that? The Democrats ignoring even what their own members know to be true, that no one in their district is talking about Russia, Russiagate, but they're talking about things that actually matter, like jobs, healthcare, college. What do you think about that?
I think it just shows that they're definitely not going to win 2020 because they clearly haven't learned anything. And it just shows that, they don't have a message. They don't know what they're doing.
They certainly don't. In fact, here's their own Congress people. So this is Jackie Spears. She's a congresswoman from California. She was on with Wolf Blitzer. He has a beard. And here's what they said.
Congresswoman, I want to begin with your reaction to this lawsuit. Some have called this a political stunt by the DNC. Doesn't this suit, though, lend credence to President Trump's claim that this Russia investigation is just sour grapes from the Democratic Party?
I actually think this lawsuit is ill-conceived, and I'm not very supportive of it.
Which is, why is the DNC fighting WikiLeaks and not Wall Street? Which is a great question. And Norman Solomon wrote this, who's been on the show before. and he's a great media watchdog. And I'll just go through a little bit what he had to say. He says, announced with the flourish by the DNC chair, Tom Perez, the civil lawsuit, which reads like a partisan polemic wrapped in legalisms, sues the Russian government, the Trump campaign, and operatives, as well as WikiLeaks and its founding editor, Julian Assange. It's hard to imagine that many voters in swing districts who'll determine whether the GOP runs the House through the end of 2020 will be swayed by the Russia-related accusations contained in the lawsuit. People are far more concerned about economic insecurity for themselves and their families, underscored by such matters as the skyrocketing costs of health care and college education. The DNC's lawsuit amounts to doubling down on its fixation of blaming Russia for the Democratic Party's monumental 2016 loss at a time when it's essential to remedy the failed approaches that were major causes of Hillary Clinton's defeat in the first place. Instead of confronting its fealty to Wall Street or overall failure to side with working class voters against economic elites, the Democratic National Committee is ramping up the party leadership's 18-month fixation on Russia. After a humongous political investment in depicting Vladimir Putin as a pivotal Trump patron and a mortal threat to American democracy, strategists atop the Democratic Party don't want to let up on seeking a big return from that investment. Protecting the investment will continue to mean opposing the threat of détente between the world's two nuclear superpowers while giving the party a political stake at thwarting any warnings of the current ominously frigid relations between Moscow and Washington. A loud and clear message from the Democrats' 2016 election debacle is that hoping for working class votes while refusing to do battle against corporate exploiters of the working class is a political dead end. The mainstream Democratic storyline of victims without victimizers lacks both plausibility and passion. So unfortunately, this assessment in the autopsy remains all too relevant. They did an autopsy on the Democratic Party, and here's the part that really sticks out. The idea that the Democrats can somehow convince Wall Street to work on behalf of Main Street through mild chiding rather than acting as Main Street's champion against the wealthy no longer resonates. We live in a time of unrest and justified cynicism towards those in power. Democrats will not win if they continue to bring a wonk knife to a populist gunfight. Nor can Democratic leaders and operatives be seen as real allies of the working class if they're afraid to alienate big funders or to harm future job or consulting prospects. So that's why they're suing WikiLeaks, Russia, and the Trump campaign instead of doing what Bernie Sanders is doing, which is following a template that works, which is FDR's New Deal. So what he's going to do, Bernie Sanders, is actually figure out the problems people have and try to offer solutions. That's what politicians are supposed to do, and that's what he's doing. But once you're bought, which is what the Democratic Party has become, they're completely been captured by corporate money. You have to now think of smoke and mirrors. And so all this, and Russia is the cause of your problems, and that's why they're doing that instead of what they're supposed to. I predict the results will be mixed at best. Brigida, what do you make of that article, and what do you make of what the DNC is doing right now?
Well, the DNC is just showing the public and their voters that this is what they are invested in. How many hours and how much manpower and how many resources do you think they're now dumping into this anti-Russia effort, anti-WikiLeaks effort? They should be taking all of that time, effort, and all of those resources and dumping it back into programs and things that the public can actually get behind rather than wasting our time on this. We are 2 years away from the next election, and they have something else coming for them if they really keep going down this path of just focusing on one thing.
I've heard no one who is in need of a job. I've heard no one who's in need of health care. I've heard no one who has a kid in college. I've heard none of those people talk about the problems with Russia. I've heard them talk about the problems with our bought government. Have you heard anybody talk about anything else besides the real problems they're having, as what Senator Chris Murphy said?
No, I haven't. People are really frustrated with the way things are going right now. That's why you have these populist uprisings on the left and on the right. And it's not just the Democrats that are paid off and bought and sold. It's also the Republicans. They just happen to be in power right now.
I mean, talk about ignoring. You know what's funny is that the Republicans did an autopsy when they lost to Barack Obama the second time, right? And so losing to a black guy with a Muslim name 2 times in a row really drove them crazy. So they decided to do a autopsy, and the autopsy revealed they should stop being as racist as they were, and and try to attract minorities and try to become a bigger tent party. And of course, they ignored it completely, and Trump went the other way, and it worked for them. It worked for them because the Democrats nominated the most hated, least popular candidate in the history of the party. In fact, they had to completely rig the primary so she could get the nomination. So that's why Trump won. It wasn't because he was a brilliant candidate. It was because people are hurting and the Democrats offered them nothing. So people wanted to smash the establishment. We got Trump. They still want to smash the establishment. And what do the Democrats give us? They give us a lawsuit instead of a jobs program. That is, why do you think the Democrats won't even try to propose a jobs program? I mean, my lifetime, they haven't had one.
I really don't know why. I think it just doesn't benefit their funders, and therefore that might be the only reason why.
It's mind-boggling. We had Dennis Kucinich on the show the other day, and he's proposing a jobs program for his state. And he hasn't figured out how many billions of dollars it takes per job. So I just want to read what Katrina Vanden Heuvel says, just because I like saying her name. Sanders is retrieving the best of our country's radical ideas, here embracing FDR's economic Bill of Rights. The sort of bold thinking we need. Sanders to introduce plan to guarantee every American a frickin' job. That's what voters respond to. You want to know how you get half the country that doesn't vote? You know, the biggest voting bloc right now in America is the half of the country that doesn't vote. Why do you think that is? Because when they came out and voted for Democrats, the Democrats punched them right in the gut. Hey, I'm going to vote for Clinton. Oh, we're going to pass NAFTA, cut the legs out from underneath your union, take your job and ship it to poor people in more desperate situations. Then we're going to deregulate Wall Street, which is going to crash the economy and kill your job in under 10 years. All while we're exploding the prison population and gutting welfare and demonizing black people, calling them super predators. They already voted for that. Bill Clinton was already president for 8 years. Then they voted for Barack Obama, who made the banks bigger, took us from 2 wars to 7, made the Bush tax permanent, created a health care giveaway to the health insurance companies and Big Pharma with no cost controls, and opened up the Arctic to drilling twice whenever Shell asked. So they know that didn't matter who they voted for, which is why half the country stayed home. The Democrats weren't offering them anything except Hillary Clinton screaming at the top of her lungs that Medicare for all will never come to pass. Here's a guy offering everyone a job. And the Democrats have no idea how to respond to that. Let's sue somebody. And it's an obvious PR stunt, even to their own members. Even to their own Congress people, it's an obvious PR stunt that they don't support. What I think is funny, and if you watch our other video, Chris Hayes interviewed Tom Perez, the head of the DNC. Chris Hayes wouldn't even ask him a question about the lawsuit. That's how bought Chris Hayes is. It was really funny to watch. Which is another big problem, right? Do you think that the media, like people call MSNBC MSDNC, which is kind of cute and what have you, and I used to think that's kind of funny. And then Ed Schultz came out just last week and revealed that no, they're literally telling their hosts what to cover, what not to cover Bernie Sanders, to cover Trump's empty podium, and to not talk about progressive issues. They're literally doing that to him, and people were afraid of Sinclair Media. So I think the reason why the DNC is allowed to do this so blatantly, even when their own members think it's stupid, is because there isn't an adversarial press against them. What do you think?
Absolutely. They completely control the press. I mean, you wake up in the morning, turn on Morning Joe, and you have the Obama's literal press secretary there, Josh Ernst, who's
Yes.
now a contributor.
Yes.
Then you also have former CIA director John Brennan. And then you look at
I know.
other companies like Netflix, who has now put on their board Susan Rice, who is the former national security advisor to Obama. Why would she want to work for Netflix? Well, Netflix just won two Oscars in the past 2 years for their documentaries. One about the Russian doping scandal called Icarus, and another one about the white helmets.
Oh.
It is in the national security's interest to control Netflix, which is the new media, right? And also to have people on MSNBC and all the mainstream networks. It's so obvious.
So this is that COINTELPRO.
Yep.
Again, happening again. This is the Church Committee hearings happening again from the 70s, when we all found out that the CIA had infiltrated our newsrooms. Are you kidding? And that's when it was a lot harder to do, because there was a lot more news media outlets. Now there's only 6.
And they don't have to infiltrate anymore. They are invited. They are given
invited.
contracts. This is a prestigious job. It's not like they have to sneak in and, pay someone off to get these stories. And they literally just show up on the doorstep and say, hey, I need a job. I'm out of the White House. Can I please be a commentator? It's a revolving door.
And what we're learning about the white helmets is that their funding is suspect from Saudi Arabia and the United States. They're not independent actors. And in fact, there's been lots of evidence that showed that they were working hand in hand with al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, and ISIS in Syria. That's what the evidence I've seen, and that's from people who've actually been there, right? Have you heard the same thing?
I've heard the same thing from people who have been there. Unfortunately, Syria is one place where there's so much conflicting information. It's really hard to know what's going on. So yes, defer to the people who have been there.
So there you go. That's why the Democrats don't have a plan for you, because they don't care about you. The Democrats care about their donors and the donor class. And that's why they're doing a PR stunt like this instead of actually proposing policies that would help people and help their lives. Woo! Please make sure you're subscribed. It only takes a second. Make sure you're subscribed and click that bell so they give you a notice whenever we drop a video. And if you can become a patron, we give you hours of bonus material every week. Our next live show is June 30th in Portland, Oregon. And we do a super solid chat every Saturday. That's our live stream. You can ask us questions and we answer back. That's Saturdays at 2 p.m. Pacific. Plus, we're on Steam It. We're steaming it right now.